Over to you, Sam.
Okay, perfect. So, can you see that? Perfect. Okay, so we'll probably stop if there's sort of breakpoints as we go along. So if you've got any questions, but as Fiona said at the end, we'll do a Q&A as well. So the agenda for today, and I appreciate some of you will have never seen a saved search before. Some of you will have done a lot more. But this, I think there's bits here that hopefully will help everyone. So firstly, we're going to talk about types of searches. In NetSuite, as we'll see, there are, I don't know the exact number, but there's probably well over 100, 150, something like that. Specifically today, there's a couple of searches that we'll go through. We'll talk about the limitations of searches, because there are a couple that it's important to be aware of, I think. We'll talk about sort of the approach that sort of I take and sort of where to start with things. We'll talk about joins. So if you've come from sort of a database background, we'll talk about what they are, how they can sort of be identified. And then we'll touch on formulas as well. And then we'll go into some examples. So types of searches, as I mentioned, there's a lot, but specifically today, and I think for a lot of your roles, probably the types that you're going to use is a customer search and transaction searches. And specifically today, we'll talk about sales orders. Obviously, transactions, you can do invoices, credits, purchase orders, all sorts. So the limitations on searches, you can only generally, as a general rule, report data which is there in NetSuite. So an example of that would be, we can create a saved search showing customers who have placed an order during the current year, but you can't create a saved search to show those that haven't. Now, when I say that, that's generally true. So in this particular example, you can report a customer's first order date. So of course, by that you could say if the customer hasn't placed an order, you know, where that date field is sort of empty, they haven't placed an order. But we'll go into it in the examples. But if we want to actually pull out the year's sales figures, if the customer hasn't placed an order at all, they won't appear in that particular search. And then we can only report live data. So an example here would be, I can tell you what a customer's balance is now, but I can't tell you what it was a month ago, or I can't even tell you what it was yesterday. Now, you can use reports in NetSuite, and probably some of you do already. And that's probably something that I guess if people want to, we can probably do another session on. But yeah, certainly saved searches, it's data it's live data that we can report on. So where to start? So I think it's important to have an idea of what you're wanting to achieve before you even sort of start trying to create the report. So an idea in your head, do I want to create a saved search showing all sales year or all customers, or do I want and then do I just want to know what the sales order value is, or do I want to know line information, such as do I want to know the number of items that somebody's purchased in the year, for example. And then I think on the one of the last points is decide whether you think you're going to use it again, and if you think you are, you can save it again, and you can sort of publish it out so that other people in your business can use that search again. And I think we sort of discussed this today, sort of between ourselves, but I'm going to show you today logged in as an admin. Obviously, dependent on your business and what your system admin has decided, you may or may not have the permissions to create saved searches. You may not have permission to publish them. So I guess after the session, you know, have a think about trying it out in, if you've got sandboxes, try it out in your sandbox. And if you don't have the permissions, obviously speak to probably your system admin in the first instance, and they can add the relevant permissions. And system admins, if you don't know what those permissions are, just log a support case, and we can advise on that for you. So yeah, if you need to, you can save the search so that you can access it again. So joins. So joins in NetSuite allow you to pull fields from a related record. Okay, so we could, and we're going to create a saved search of customer sales for the current year. And in that search, we want the customer's account number to appear. But we could have, that's just an example, but we could have anything else on the customer record, such as their telephone number, email address, category, department, whatever we choose. They only work one way. So in other words, is use it hops. So I could effectively hop from a purchase, or I could on a sales order save search, I could go down one level. I could tell you the sort of linked purchase order. What I can't do is go down any further than that. So I can't go down and tell you what anything on the sort of vendor bill that was linked to that purchase order, or what's happened with that vendor bill, because that's at least 2 joins, and NetSuite just doesn't allow us to go down that far. And then okay, and then to identify whether it's a join, we'll go through this, but when you're adding your fields or your criteria filters to the search, at the very bottom you've got the fields ... and that means it's a join, and then we'll go through it, but it gives you all of the fields on that sort of linked record, and you can pull those into the search. And then the last point, and then I'll just ask if anybody's got any questions afterwards as well. But as a general rule, if you know your formulas in Excel or SQL, if you've done bits and pieces with that in the past, you can generally apply the same theory to formulas in NetSuite. The only real difference is instead of an if statement, NetSuite uses a case statement. So this is just an example that I personally use quite a lot, and we'll use this in our example. But this is basically saying when the month of the transaction's date is in January, then we want to pull in the amount. Otherwise, in that column, we put a 0. And then the end, because all case statements have to end. Otherwise, NetSuite will basically chuck an error. There's an awful lot you can do with formulas. This is sort of a very basic overview, because I guess our sort of target audience here is very different. Some of you have a lot of experience, some of you won't have any, may have seen a saved search a handful of times. But if you've got access to Sandbox and you have some free time, it's always a good thing, I think, to have a play around. and yeah, see what you can come up with. So before we move on to the examples, has anybody got any questions on what we've gone through so far? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jessica has a question. Jessica, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was just intrigued with the joins and only going down one level, as it were. Do you think there's ever anything in the future of NetSuite releases that they might improve on that you can dig down a bit deeper, or do you think that's a big no-no?
Not with a save search. Whether it's in their roadmap, certainly not that I'm aware of. And Brian, unless you're, yeah. I mean, I've been using NetSuite now for 5 years, and it's certainly always been the case. Save searches haven't really changed at all in that time. And they have got something called a Suite Analytics Workbook.
Yep.
I've personally not done a lot with. I know one of our consultants that has, and I believe he can go down 2 levels, possibly more. Or if that's something you want to look at, we can, and I'm sure it would be beneficial to sort of do a sort of a further.
Yeah, we've touched on Suite Analytics stuff before, but yeah, only very, very briefly. So yeah. Oh, that's fine. Thank you very much.
No worries. Anyone else? Okay, so let's move on to examples. So, okay, so obviously your navigation in NetSuite will be very dependent on your role. I'm logged in as the admin, so I've got access to everything. Your dashboard very likely be different because it's a demo account, so we've got a lot of things in there that you may not have. But as a general rule, you can get to a save search one of either 2 ways, dependent on your navigation. So you can go to lists, search, save searches and new, or pretty similar, but you can go to reports, save searches, all save searches and new. It just really depends on how your role is configured. Like I said, there are hundreds of search types. Again, as an admin, I've got access to every record type. Your list will no doubt be shorter because an admin wouldn't have access to things like a non-admin role wouldn't have access to things like locations, and they wouldn't be able to. There's certain certain types of searches, such as login audit trails, script logs, that you wouldn't be able to run if you're not an admin. So yeah, your list is going to be a lot shorter, but yeah, as you can see from here, you can run an awful lot of search types. So the one we're interested today is a transaction search. Okay, so the first thing to do if you're going to save it, because you can just preview it, but we are going to save this report, is call it customer sales this year. Okay, you can put a custom ID in here if you wish. Yeah, it's up to you. I mean, it would be something like the BBS part is sort of our, as in us, but that would be whatever you, I guess, the 3 letters that you'd refer to your company as. Now, the public box will determine, is it just a private search for you, or can anyone else in the company sort of see and access this search? I am going to make it public in this case. We've got some of the checkboxes here that we won't go through today. Some of them are self-explanatory, such as available for reminders, meaning can it be used on the reminders on your home dashboard? But For the purposes today, we'll just keep it quite simple. So we need to define the criteria for the search. So you can think of these as your filters. So within a transaction, we need to determine what type we need to look at. So you can either scroll through the list of fields, but that will take a lot of time. So once you get to know what the sort of field names are, you can type. So we'll go to type, and you can select multiples by selecting one of them and holding down. I use a Mac, but I think on yours it'd be the Shift key, the Shift or Tab, and you can select multiples if you need to. But in this case, we want to look at sales orders. So we'll select sales order, we'll click set, and that'll add our first filter. We then need to decide, do we want to just look at the header of the transaction? So do we literally just want to know the transaction's amount, or do we need to know line level information, such as sort of how many items they actually ordered during that year? So that'd be a filter called mainline, and we're just going to say yes, because in this example, we literally just want the amounts that have been placed. And then the last one is just to filter by date, because we only want to look at sales that were placed within year and then this year. You can define your own here, but if you set this to one of these sort of quick filters, what it will do is, especially if you set it to this month, is a really good example, because what it would do is on the first of the month, it will automatically roll forward the sort of search criteria for you. So you don't need to go back and the criteria, which is really good, especially for the year searches, because then on the 1st of January every year, it will reset for the next year. So I think that's quite a good one. So that's the criteria. So this is, you've got standard and you've got summary criteria. We won't go through summary today, because that can be quite complex. And this is probably one of the, I'd say one of the most straightforward that we're going to look at today. So then I'll just add some results, and then what we'll do is we'll sort of, once we previewed the search, we'll sort of come back and see if anyone's got any questions. So clicking on the results, and these are the sort of search columns that you want to appear. Now, NetSuite will pull in a lot by default. In most cases, I mean, what you can do is you can preview the search, and probably when you're testing things out in Sandbox, you could preview the search, see what these fields return. And I think that's a good way of sort of finding out specific names for fields, because memo, for example, is the description line on the item line, which is a bit of an odd concept to get your head around, but they're not always, obviously they're not always named sort of appropriately. So yeah, it's good, I think, to try this stuff out. But what I personally do, if you know the columns you want to add back in, just remove all, and they'll all disappear, and you can sort of start from fresh. So the first thing we're going to add in is the customer's name. Now, it's actually called mainline name, mainline for the transaction, and we want their name, so it's mainline name. We're also going to give it a custom label, because that mainline name may not mean anything. If we call it customer, it's probably going to make more sense. So we're going to group it because, of course, the customer is likely to have placed multiple orders during the current year. We only want one in the search, we want one line per customer, and we want separate columns for each of the months. I will only go up to May, but obviously you can carry this forward to the end of the year. So we'll add our group as the summary type, and we'll add. So what we're also going to do is, and we touched upon this on our joins. So we're going to scroll right down to the bottom. So customer mainline fields ... means it's our joins. Okay, and then you get to select the fields. So these are all of the fields on the customer record that we can pull from. So we've got account is their account number. And then what we're going to do is, because we want it to appear in our sort of summarized or grouped report, we need to select min or max, doesn't matter, because there's only one account number on the customer, so we're not getting the largest or smallest. We just want there's only one, so that doesn't matter min or max. That's all fine. Now we need to put this in summary label, and the reason is, if you put it in, and I'll show you, because you can drill down into the report. We'll go through that, but in this case we need to put it in the summary label box, and then we'll use our formula. So formula currency, and we'll go sum, because we want to sum up the amounts that the customers placed. We'll expand our formula box, and we'll put in the formula that we used earlier, and I'll go through exactly what this means. It doesn't actually matter whether you put it in uppercase or lowercase. I always like to put formulas in uppercase, but that's literally just me, personal preference. So just to explain what we're doing here. So what we're saying is, we are taking the month number from the transactions date, and where it's 1 January, then we want we actually want the foreign currency amount, and the reason is, this is a one world account, so we've got multiple subsidiaries. We've also got multiple currencies in play. So this particular customer, or one of them on this report, transacts in euros, and yet our base subsidiary, so we as a company, transact in GBP. And the problem is, if we were just to return amount, it will actually convert any sales figures down into that GBP figure. You may or may not want that, so it's either FX amount or amount. And what you can do is, if you don't know the field name, like I said, I've been doing this quite a while, so I do know quite a few field names. But you've got the field drop down here, and you can select things like date, transactions date. It will sort of wrap it in braces, which means it will pull that field into the formula, and then you sort of might have to sort of copy and paste this into the relevant part of the formula. So we'll do this for each of the months. So just copy that formula. I'll only do it to May. I think there is actually data in the sort of our demo account up until later in the year, but obviously we're only part way through, and I think for the example it's enough just to do a few months, just so you get the sort of general gist. Okay, so we've added all our columns on. So then what we can do is we can either preview the search, or we can save it as we are now, and we can run it. It's what I'm going to do. So as you can see, we've got 10 customers. So it says 11 here, but of course you've got the total line. So we've got customer, we've got our account number, we've got no sales in January, we've got some sales in February, March, April, and May, and so on through the year. So like I mentioned earlier, you've got the custom label and you've got the summary label. Now you can drill down into the report. So if we included, and then you can sort of, if you included it, you could have put the sales order number, sort of. Actually, we'll do that. So you can edit a search very easily. You can just edit the search if you are the owner and or have permissions to edit the search. But what we'll do is we'll drop in the document number, which is the sales order number, and we'll call it SO number. I'm not going to add a summary type, and the reason is we don't want it to appear in our sort of summarized report, but if we need to drill into anything, we can click on one of the customer's names, and therefore we can say, yeah, it was sales order 5014, and we should probably have given those columns a custom label as well, but we could have seen, for example, it's in May. So I'm just going to add a further field on, and then I'll open the floor for any questions. But what I'd like to know is what was the amount of the customer's most recent order. So I'm going to add amount. I want to know maximum, their most recent order. So we've added that new column on, but the problem here is, as you can see here, if the customer's total sales for May was £466, it's not possible that their most recent order was 14,616. So there's a fix for this, and it's something that's always been there, and it's one that to be fair, I've only sort of recently started using. So you've got this when ordered by field, and what you can do in there is it will say, you can say date, and then using the summary type, we can either get the amount of their earliest order or the amount of their most recent order. And then we'll just preview that search again, and therefore it's all fixed, and we have actually got the data that we want. So that in sort of a very quick overview of the customer sales search. Has anybody got any questions on that?
I have a question, Sam. It's not about the formulas or the summary, but it's what you mentioned earlier, the name of the fields.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I can give an example on the transaction one. For the name of the customer, I'm currently using the one that's called, in the safe search, it's called name, which will show you the name of the account. Mm-hmm. But if you go to a sales order and you look at the field ID, it's called entity ID. And of course, you can put whatever label you want on the actual transaction. So how, in that case, would you know which field you actually need to pull?
Yeah, so what you can do here is, so when you're adding the formula in, if you add in, for example, I mean, mainline name, you'll get to know when you do these searches that's the sort of the entity name, but that's called main name. I think, yeah. Once you get to know the sort of different names, because like I said, memo, there's two. Memo meaning the transaction
item description.
level description, yeah, or memo main being the sort of header memo.
But that's what I mean. Like, you can only figure this one out by trial and error, basically, and
Yeah.
beating your head against the wall. Is there anywhere in NetSuite that would tell you like this is called this and save search?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there might be something on Suite Answers, but it is something, to be honest, that I've kind of picked up along the years. But it might well be on Suite Answers, yes.
Well, thank you.
No worries. And anyone else? No? Okay, cool. So we'll move on.
Sam, sorry,
Yeah.
quick question. Are you going to cover applied or applying transactions at all in Save Search?
Not today, no.
Fine, okay, because that's got me thoroughly stumped a few times.
Okay.
Good
Yeah, if you want to pick that with Ryan, and we can sort a session on that, I'm sure.
Good, thank you.
No worries. Yeah, that is a very good one, actually. And that's probably a good thing to mention, actually, because that is a join, but generally it's linked to the transaction line, not the header. So it's, yeah, I can see why you'd get stuck on that one. So once you've saved a save search, you can also add it to your dashboard. So if we go on personalize and we'll click on custom search, we'll add that portlet on and we'll go setup. We'll find the name of our search. So customer sales this year. Now result size, if you have it set to 10, it will only display the first 10 results. That might be okay. You might just want to know sort of the top 10. I guess I'm not sure there is a maximum limit on this, but I wouldn't go and do anything sort of crazy on it, because that'll fill your dashboard with results and you might not want that. So we'll add it on, and then every time we go into NetSuite, it will refresh and it will display this report to us. Obviously, dashboards, if you don't already, you can do an awful lot with. You can have KPI meters as we've got here. We won't go into that today, but yeah, you can do an awful lot with. So then we'll also do a customer search, which is probably the most sort of basic search, I'd say. So, and what we want to pull out is, and this is probably relevant for any of you that are sort of doing finance stuff. We want to pull out customers who have an overdue balance. So we'll go overdue balance is greater than 0, and where the days overdue figure, so they are overdue and they've been overdue for more than, say, 90 days, so greater than 90 days. All right, so that's our criteria, and it probably is, for this example, it's probably as easy as that, really. So in our results, we will go name, customer's name. We'll go what their overdue balance is, how many days overdue they are, and we'll also add in their credit limit. And we'll also add in whether they're on credit hold or not, because that might be relevant to you, it might not. You can, so as you saw me doing there, so I did that quite quickly, but you can add fields at the end of a sort of add more fields at the end, or you can click on an existing sort of search column, you can insert it above if you want to. And you can sort of, once you've added them, you can move it around by sort of either dragging it. So you can drag filters around, or you can sort of use these move up, down, top, bottom. So we will preview that search. I'm not going to save it. But as you can see here, we've got some customers here. One's got a credit limit. They've all got overdue balances, quite considerably overdue. But yeah, that's probably, I think for your finance side, that's I think that's a good one to show. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on searches. I appreciate that's a sort of very generic overview, but I think hopefully it shows the sort of approach that certainly I take and I'd suggest taking, and some sort of basics. So I guess Fiona, back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sam. Thanks very much. I hope that was insightful for everybody and shed some light on safe searches, whether you've been using them for a while or whether that's brand new to you. I'd now like to invite you to put your cameras back on if you'd like to. Feel free to come off mute. And then if you have any questions relating to, again, to safe searches, what Sam has been through this morning, or whether you would like to ask any other NetSuite related questions, we're all ears. We're here. We are on time. I mean, we're approaching 11:15, so we're not going to keep you unnecessarily. But equally, you know, you have our attention. So please use this time to ask away. Might be worth perhaps using the raise your hand system if you can find that within Teams, just because there's quite a few of us on the call here today. But yeah, so I'll hand over to everybody and see who has any questions. Anthony, I see you there. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute still. There you go. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not on mute anymore. I just had a question. We haven't really touched about it today, but I had a question about the basically scheduling safe searches to run on a schedule and emailing people. Is there a way to do it without a workflow or a script that runs more than once a day?
Yeah, so no. So, and I should have really, that was on my agenda to go through. So let's just share again. I'll go through scheduling. We were meant to go through that. So if I find my search, so scheduling, for those of you that don't know, but we can set it to email us. So either when records are created, so you might want a search every time a sales order over a certain value gets placed, or you probably will. You probably want it sending, I don't know, 9 o'clock every day. Do you want to summarize those reports? And do you want to send if there's no results? So even if I don't know, you had a search at the end of every day to pick up orders over a certain value, do you still want to know that there haven't been any orders placed? And then what you can do is you can select certain recipients. So these will have to be either an employee or a contact in NetSuite. And I think it's quite important, especially this is side for adding workflows as well. I think it's important sort of to make sure that you don't, if it's an employee, because sometimes employees add themselves as contacts to customers. I think it's quite important that you make sure that you select the employee and not their contact record. And the reason is they may have set themselves up as a contact on a customer. You don't know if they've used their actual email address. I think it's quite important to note that, because that has caught me out in the past. Recipients from results. So you could you could send each sales rep a particular report of their sort of sales for that year. You could send that out, or for that month, you could send it out 9 o'clock every first of the month if you wanted to. Updated fields is more to do with when do you want to send email alerts when a particular transaction status changes. That might be handy to have. And customized message, from subject, introduction, single record results, and then you can as I'm sure some of you have done email templates, exactly the same. You can pull in fields here that you want to pull in to the email that gets sent out, and then for summarized results, you could send it as a CSV file, an XLS file, or you can just send it within the messages as sort of a table. And then, do you want to include a view record link? So it might be that you're sending this because I don't know, a customer's placed an order that takes them over their credit hold, and you want credit control to be aware of it. And the last one on the scheduling, you've got single, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and various bits and pieces, such as do you want it on the 5th of May every year, first Thursday of May every month, weekly, do you want it on every day, so specific days, and then the start time. Now, you asked the question there of, can you do it sort of multiple times per day? And the answer is no. So your choice is there. Either, as you said, using a workflow or a script, run that same save search and email the results out multiple times a day, or as some people do, they kind of duplicate the search and create a 10 a.m. version and a 2 p.m. version, therefore sending sort of twice a day. So that's really either you kind of duplicate the search as many times as you need, or yes, use a workflow or script.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we have Lucy Forbes got her hand up. What's your question, Lucy?
Yeah, just following on from that, we've got a search that we're trying to use where there's a tick box that says send alert when records are created / updated.
Mm-hmm.
So how would that work to be just when it's created and not updated, or is it just any changes regardless it's going to send out an email?
So I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this, as long as you haven't specified updated fields, then it will just send on creation.
Okay, I'll give it a go. Thank you.
But if you get stuck, then pop a support ticket in and we can give you a hand with that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Lucy, for that. Does anybody else have any other questions? Again, it can be safe searches or anything NetSuite related while we're here all together, and we can try and pick Sam's brains and Ryan's brains and whatnot while we're here. No? Okay, well, I'm not going to labour on that, so that's absolutely fine. Thank you so much. I'm going to just very quickly just reference any of the business. I'm going to hand over to Ryan, who's just got one more thing to share with you, and then I think we'll wrap up for the morning. So over to you, Ryan.
Brilliant. So the next bit in our series really is a webinar with Pulte, and that's on the 25th of January at 10 a.m. So this is relating to AP automation. So if you're having any issues with supplier invoicing and want OCR and AP automation, if you're dealing with over 100 invoices a month, I'd definitely recommend having a look at this. The invite will be sent out next week, or you can register through the websites.
Fantastic, thank you. Great. Okay. Well, so we are all finished for today. So we've got some time back this morning, and thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to have so many people with us this morning. The recording will be sent round most likely this afternoon, but definitely by close of play tomorrow. Once you get the link to that, feel free to share that with any colleagues within your business that might find it useful. Equally, after watching it again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email and I'll get that to the relevant person in the team here at BrightBridge, and we'll come back to you as soon as we can. So without further ado, I'm going to wrap up the session. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye then.
Great.
Thank you.